Hey, good morning. This is Saturday morning with George and Phil. 22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you found yourself like me, a little bit out of shape, struggling in a dead end job, which thankfully I'm not, or in job transition, we're your hosts, George Murray and Lenny Newman, pinch hitting for Phil while he's away to help you move from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. We're glad you could meet with us this morning. And we do encourage questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as timely as you provide those questions. So, George, great to see you.
Hey, good morning, Lenny. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I couldn't be better.
All right. Hey, want to talk. We are grateful for our viewers. We are streaming on LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. So if you're actually watching the YouTube reprogram, just hit the subscribe button and it'll notify you the next time Coffee with Phil and George / Lenny is on next.
So, George, we start a 12-part series last week.
Hey, excuse me, Lenny. I want to interrupt here. I just want to ask the viewers, how many times when you actually tell somebody to go jump in the lake that they actually do? Well, our co-host today, Lenny Newman, is doing just that for a special cause. Hey, Lenny, you want to tell us just the reason why you're going to kind of take a dip in the icy waters of Minnesota?
Well, it's a bucket list item, George, from 4 years ago. And quite frankly, it's such a great cause with Special Olympics. I'm now on my 4th consecutive year. So a week from today, I take the big plunge in Lake Riley. So for those of you who are familiar with Special Olympics, it's a phenomenal organization and it does great things. So thanks for that, George. I appreciate it. Now,
hey, well, Lenny's looking for donations, just a couple of bucks. We're actually putting it in the chat. You guys can hit that and just help him achieve his goal for Special Olympics.
Thanks, George. Can we get back to the program today now?
Yeah. Before we do, we want to turn around and thank our sponsors at Thrivet. So the people at Thrivet, along with Skip Nelson, have been helping people reach financial success. In this half of the month, we're actually helping people focus on getting in a lower tax bracket because of the tax season is coming. And so you can turn around and get a free 1-hour review with Skip just by hitting your phone to that little scan bar down in the right-hand corner. So again, thanks for the folks at Thrivet.
Thanks, Skip and group. We appreciate it. And now back to the topic at hand. We're in the second of our 12-part series that tracks with George's second book that's due out in May, Ignite, Engage, and Retain. And George, can you talk a little bit more about the book and kind of the second quote-unquote chapter of the book?
Yeah. So again, I found that I like to write books. There's gaps, right? And so again, with the Great Resignation and seeing a lot of the challenges, especially this last couple of years, we've had a lot of indications in the last 10 years leading up to this Great Resignation, and businesses and leaders are really haven't paying attention. So, there's 3 questions a book's going to answer. If I'm a business owner or a leader and I've got a team or hybrid team or just a team in itself that's really not engaged, how do I get them back engaged, running in the right direction, and drive my business profitability, sales growth, et cetera? Second question is if I'm taking a new position because, hey, they read my book, Hired. One of the biggest challenges is that, going into this, engagement is a challenge. How do I start off on the right foot? And the last question it's going to ask or answer is for those who are actually in businesses, they're doing some great things, but they're still seeing that churn and that turnover. What's the next level? So, and again, the topic today is really, where is the trust? Because, a lot of times people are leaving because managers, it's not the business, it's not the company, right? And they're failing to really develop and establish that trust. Or when trust is broken, what do we do?
George, it's interesting. In a recent Gallup poll that I happened to get my hands on, it talked about the importance of employees trusting their leadership. Those who trust their leadership are twice, if not 3 times as likely to be with their current employer a year from now. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on, leaders focusing on trust, and do you have any things that you can share with the group here?
Well, Lenny, there's multiple reasons from hearing from the outside companies on what the companies plan to do. The social media environment we sit in, and many failed commitments from leaders have made this a problem. And you know what? In order for me, let's bring in a subject matter expert. So let's bring in Susan Stone, who's a Chief Human Resources Officer of an innovative company of window coverings. And welcome to the show, Susan.
Good morning, George and Lenny. Pleasure to be here with both of you today.
Great to see you this morning, Susan. Great to see you. I'm just curious, can you give some thoughts on how leaders can actually regain or gain trust of their employees? What are some thoughts that you can share with us this morning?
Yeah, really. Yeah. So first you got to start with what was lost, right? So you got to understand, where do you start from? So where did the trust drop off? Do some self-reflection, I think, is probably the recurring theme when I talk about trust, is it starts with you. So what's going on that you need to self-reflect on and understand what your part is in that loss of trust.
Sure. So really diagnose where you are right now and what's quote unquote missing.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to start with self first. All good leaders, right?
Sure. George, what questions do you have, buddy?
Yeah, Susan, how much of a trust issue are you seeing or you're hearing in some of your social gatherings, whatever, is a contributing factor of why this great resignation is happening?
So I think one of the things that I've heard frequently when we've been talking to potential candidates to join our company has been, how did you handle the pandemic? What type of information was shared throughout that? Were you letting your team members know what was going on with the company? What was going well? Were you succeeding, failing? So I think it was that piece during the pandemic of how transparent was the organization with the communications, and did the individual really understand the success or failure of the company, what was going on? And so that transparency and the communication, I think, was a really key factor in organizational trust, which really went down to the team member too.
So I can't help but ask this question. When you talk about the COVID, you talk about hybrid, and now we're kind of in this period of the great resignation.
Mm-hmm.
Does that suggest that maybe the trust wasn't right where it needed to be with all the things that companies and employees have been through? Can you comment on that just a little bit?
Yeah, so it's always the thing when you go through challenges in an organization, what was there, what was cracking or starting to show cracks is only going to get worse. And what was really going well will continue to get better. So if there's anything that was cracking before the pandemic happened, it's just going to get worse. So if trust was a big factor, and more than likely it was, depending upon the organization. A lot of companies like to hold information close to the vest. They don't like to share. And then you go through something as, as challenging as the pandemic, when it's so unknown. You got to be really crystal clear with everybody. This is where we're at. This is what we're trying to do. We don't have all the answers. And just be transparent, be honest. And it wasn't easy for any of us leaders during that time. And it's, still going on to some degree. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, are you seeing any, shall I say, positive movement forward in terms of, we've learned a lot the last 2 years, and I think you're exactly right. You've got to be transparent. You have to have humility. And
Mm-hmm.
To your point, there were so many discussions that I was involved with that started with, we don't have the answers, but this is the best available information. So it seems to me that hopefully we're on the backside of this great resignation. I'm just not sure that's necessarily where we are. You care to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think we are. I think what came out of this time period and still is continuous, people are really trying to look at what's important to me. It used to be a lot, it's focused on career and this is where I'm going and, my trajectory and, my family is great. It's important to me, but your actions didn't necessarily reflect that. You could be staying late at work. You could be putting in a lot of hours, could be traveling. And I think everybody is doing a lot of, what's important to me and how do I balance what I really appreciated from this time of maybe spending more time at home because I had remote work or got to do something different because I lost, team members. So I had to fill in. So I think it's a lot of just like the shuffling of values and focus is
Mhm.
really, and that's hard as an employer, right? Because you're like, how do you support that?
So let me ask this. I mean, obviously, trust in leadership is critical. There's probably a direct correlation between a high level of trust and lower turnover. Can you share a couple maybe anecdotes or examples of things that have helped either your organization or organizations you're familiar with that have really helped, shall I say, bolster the trust and ultimately, hopefully, basically stem some of that high turnover?
Yeah, so I think once it goes back to just communicating frequently and often and
Yeah.
at all areas in the organization. Don't just focus on one that may be, having the most trouble. Go to the ones that are actually doing well. So it's more intentional. So you have to be really intentional in what you're doing and how much you're communicating. I think you've got to really care about the whole person and not just what's going on at work. So understanding what's going on at home and being really flexible. We've got a lot of elderly individuals that their children are now taking care of them. So it's not just their children. So it's, that classic sandwich generation. So you just have to be really just thoughtful and intentional and be listening. You got to listen more than you speak. And this is a lot for me to be talking because I'm so used to listeners.
No,
there's a line out at your door. Hey, we need to talk to you. Hey, Susan, I just got a comment and a question. Comment back to your earlier point of the workforce and the potential pool of candidates.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and having my first interviews. It was basically, when do I start? What's my pay?
Yeah.
And the pool of candidates, I mean, they're asking those very detailed questions. When's the last time my boss exploded and how was that received and everything else? I mean, I've really been shocked with some of the questions and the education of the folks and the questions that they're asking. It's like now the employer is more on the interviewing process than the employee or the potential employee.
Yep.
And so that's the first comment. But then the next question is that, with this great resignation, and I'm a new leader and I'm going to take a new role, let's say starting Monday, right?
Yeah.
And I've been told that, trust is a challenge. What are some of the things that I can start right off the bat on Monday?
Good question.
Yeah, that is a really good one. And I think goes back to listen, be curious, ask a lot of questions, and really be present and just be there for them. It's kind of like if you had your own agenda, please set it aside. Just set it aside for a while and understand what's going on with the team and the individuals that are in front of you. They're the most important. That's what you're there to do, is to serve and help them be their, best selves and unlock their potential. So listen, and be really, it's kind of like if you hear something, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Ask the question. Don't just, because it'll engage you'll learn a lot more about the individuals on your team.
So this is more a test for me to make sure I'm listening. What I heard you say is if there's something you pick up on, it's probably a good thing for you to ask that follow-up question, even though we've been taught in interviews there's certain questions we're not able to ask and all that sort of stuff. Your point is just be very, very attentive and look for the signs. I think that's what I heard you say.
Absolutely. Yeah. All within our compliance, of course. I got to.
Yeah. Of course.
But there's so many other ways that you can be engaging and make it conversational. I think that's the other thing when you're talking to individuals, whether it is for a new job or candidates, it's sort of like this. Just have a conversation, be human.
So let me ask this question. I'm sure in your career you've experienced leaders either in your organization or you've heard of others who have trust issues within their organization. What suggestions do you typically think are most beneficial to be very, very, top line, not detail, but just overall? I heard one, listening. What are some other suggestions you might have?
Part of it is get some feedback from others. So if you're somebody that has maybe got some blind spots or you just can't quite see the full picture, but you keep hearing that, you've got some real trust issues. If somebody's coming to you that and you're like, I don't have trust issues, what are you talking about? go ask and get some feedback from some trusted advisors of just understanding how this might be showing up. And so you get some different perspectives and really be open to the process. But then alternatively, if you're not willing to do that, just know what you're risking and what you're going to lose if you don't go through that process, because that could be the motivator for you to be vulnerable to ask and have some of those conversations.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, one of the things that I found is leaders, gone are the days of the leader of do as I say, not as I do, right? Okay. You really got to tell the why behind the what, right? Because people are more willing to kind of lean in versus, guess what? I don't agree with that. I'm out of here, right?
Mm-hmm. No, so it's an exciting time to be in the workforce and engaging in these conversations.
So Susan, here's one final question that I have, and then I'll let George ask any other questions he might have. If trust was the primary reason for me leaving my last role, what things should I be looking for as I'm in transition, or what kind of questions can I ask that'll help me to get to, hey, is this a trusting culture, or is this a culture where there's not trust?
Yeah, the thing I always go to, what is communicated in your organization? How much of the financials are shared? That is the really first thing that you can understand about an organization, is how much of the financials do they share with the organization? And then start asking around. Don't just talk to one person, talk to a few and ask that in your interview process. Like, I want to talk to your people.
Sharing of financial information is something that's near and dear to my heart as a former CFO. The other thing that I found, and this has been helpful in my career as I've made move with different companies, asking ownership, what are their thoughts on using, lawyers to resolve business conflicts? And I've even gone so far as to ask the question, well, what do you typically spend in a given year on legal fees? And it's really interesting, if you get a business owner that says, well, I absolutely don't do that. I mean, what that tells me is they try to resolve things peacefully without necessarily, ultimately going to the hammer. So,
no, that's a good question.
George, any other final questions you have before we let Susan enjoy the rest of her weekend?
Well, definitely, given the fact that we're more and more involved in this hybrid workforce, what are some of the things that, a leader can do to really not only engage and ignite the workforce, but make sure that we're building trust between the Internet of Things, et cetera?
So understand their communication methods is one of them, because some people really want to be attentive online and they're engaged, but others still like the good old fashioned, give me a phone call. So I think understanding communication will foster the right amount of trust, because you're in connection. So how do you connect and make sure that you do that to how they connect best? So,
well, I think of all the different generations we now have in the workforce, and quite frankly, I'm of the generation, and I think George is too. It's usually a phone call. That's usually our first, or a face-to-face. Yep. So a lot of these newer ways of communicating, quite frankly, what I've learned is you have to meet people where they are. So if we have people who wish to communicate via text or via email or Teams or Zoom or whatever, meet them where they are. And quite frankly, that requires all of us to compromise. So,
yep.
Well,
I have one last question. Susan, big book fan, right? Especially now being an author or whatever, I'd love to read other people's books and perspectives. One of the books that I've read recently is The Trusted Leader by David Hustler. He's a Minnesota author, great book. And he actually talks about, a lot of problems and challenges in business today are really the root cause of trust. What are some of the books that you would recommend, or a book that you would recommend leaders to turn around and read?
You're gonna totally put me on the spot, George. Of course, I know what was my Covey one that I sent the other day. See, I am not good at recall. I'm definitely a written person. So yeah, Covey had just written Stephen Covey just wrote one that has some really good tips that I really, really enjoyed. We can send it out. But I also think George's book would be fantastic. I think you got to check it out when it comes out in May. There's going to be some good nuggets in there.
I think we can slip that last question in from a viewer.
Yeah, absolutely. The question that just came up in job hunting, networking with the newly departed people who used to work for the company, they will tell you what the trust climate was like. I think the point is, if you reach out to people who are either at the company now or who've left, that may be a good source to kind of get under the hood. That's a great point. So yeah, I want to make sure we share that with all the viewers. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Susan?
Nope, I 100% agree. And also take it as one piece of information. So
yeah, it's a data point of what could be many. So
yep, exactly.
I don't have any other further questions. How about you, George? I know we're running
Hey,
up
Susan,
time.
I appreciate you jumping on the call early on a Saturday morning and sharing your perspective on trust. With the books, I actually, the question was asked, we'll actually post it in the comments later of what that book from Stephen Covey is. Awesome. But again, I want to thank you for your time, Susan, and also your insights. Susan was one of the 40 CEOs, CHROs, and CFOs that I reached out to and got perspective when I wrote my second book. So thank you again, Susan.
Appreciate the time, George and Lenny. It's been a pleasure. Been an honor.
Thanks Susan. So we enjoyed it. Have a great Saturday.
Goes fast. Goes fast.
It does go fast.
So again, I want to ask people who are interested in connecting with Susan. I've known Susan for probably more than 5 years, and she's always been a wealth of knowledge in helping me navigate all sorts of things. And so you can reach out to Susan on LinkedIn or email.
George, I want to share with the group our next show is on March 19th. As I like to say, same time, same George channel. And we'll be continuing on with our third part of the 12-part series based on, George, your upcoming book on leadership engagement. And we're going to be talking about leadership engagement, compensation, and reward, which I think will be a very interesting topic.
Yeah. Even the traditional companies that only have an annual review are being forced. One of the major challenges is warehouse folks, right? I mean, there's just not enough people out there, and so a company I had worked through in the pandemic, we've actually had to increase that particular role, responsibilities, and salary a few times in 1 year. I mean, it's just you have to keep pace with the demand out there in the market. So I'm really looking forward to, not only the topic but the special guest.
So until next time, March 19th, 2 weeks from today at 8:02 a.m. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks so much for sharing a little bit of your coffee with George and Lenny pinch hitting for Phil. And remember, to achieve forward,
make it better.